World War II was raging. Anyway, you're just a girl, but not my mother. She said, if you really want to do something like this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and if you don't give up, hopefully you find a way. And that message I have taken to young people all around the world, particularly in disadvantaged communities. And I wish Mum was alive to know how many people have come up to me or written to me and said, Jane, thank you. You taught me, because you followed your dreams, I can follow mine. And so I wish Mum was alive to know how her message has touched lives all over the world. So, I sometimes wonder, why am I in this position? Why am I traveling around the world, attracting large audiences? Why do people come up to me in airports and say, can they have a photo? Why do people say, oh, you're Jane, and burst into tears? It's very strange. For me, it's peculiar. But I came to realize there are two Janes. There's this one, a nice human being, you know, caring human being, talking to you all, making jokes. And then there's the other Jane, and that's the sort of icon Jane. And that Jane has been created by National Geographic and Discovery Channel and the media. I suppose I've had a little bit to do with it, but it's, you know, people say, I don't know how you do what you do. And I say, well, I don't either. I have great work to keep up with that iconic Jane and try and live up to her reputation. So I do feel I'm being put in this world with a mission. And what is the mission today? The mission is to give people hope. Well, I want to start off with saying, you all know that I worked with chimpanzees. I was the first person to try and study them in the world. And once they stopped running away from me, which took 4 whole months, and once I'd seen the chimp I named David Greybeard using tools to fish for termites, which brought the National Geographic into the picture, and they agreed to fund the research and to send a filmmaker, photographer, Hugo van Lauwijk, to record what I was gradually beginning to learn as the chimps lost their fear. Well, I began to learn, I think, the most surprising thing, how like us they are. We know today that we share 98.6% of our DNA with chimpanzees. They are our closest living relatives. But what was so fascinating for me was the way in which they behaved so like us. Non-verbal communication, kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, begging for food with hand outstretched, males competing for dominance, standing upright, hair bristling, swaggering, shaking a fist, lips bunched in a furious scowl. Doesn't that remind you of some male politicians today? I will name no names, but watching the relationship between mothers and offspring was very, very fascinating for me. It's a long childhood, 5 years, the infant sleeping with the mother, riding on her back, gradually less and less. And then the next child is born, and the older child continues to travel with the mother. And even when the oldest child is 10, 11, 12, there's still this close bond. In fact, sometimes you'll see an adult male still spending quite a lot of time with his mum and the rest of the family. So there are these close bonds between them. And it was a bit of a shock to find that chimpanzees, like us, have a dark, aggressive side. They can be very violent. There's even a kind of primitive warfare. They kill. Males will patrol their territory, and if they see an individual from a neighboring community, even a female, they will attack and leave the victim to die of wounds. The only individuals who are safe from this are the young adolescent females who haven't yet given birth, and the males will try and take them into their own community, which of course prevents too much genetic similarity. Well, just as they show this violence, they also show love, compassion, and true altruism, as when an adult male may adopt a motherless infant that's no relation at all, at least no close relation. And so, knowing how like us they are, it was a big shock when my mentor, Louis Leakey, who had chosen me to go and study chimps, even though I had not been to university, he now wrote to me and said, "Jane, I chose you because your mind hadn't been cluttered up by, back then, the very reductionist attitude towards animals in the scientific world. But now," he said, "now I want other scientists to recognize you seriously, so you need a degree. And I've got you a place in Cambridge University to study ethology, to get a PhD. Well, I didn't know what ethology was. I hadn't been to college. I didn't want to be a scientist. I wanted to find out about chimpanzees, but of course I had to go, and I was nervous. Can you imagine how I felt when many of the professors, of whom I was in awe, told me I'd done everything wrong? You shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names, that's not scientific. You should give them numbers. You cannot talk about their personalities or their minds capable of solving problems, and you certainly can't talk about their emotions, like happiness, sadness, fear, despair. Why? Those are unique to humans. In fact, truly, this is 1961, it was being taught that humans were totally separated from the rest of the animal kingdom. It was like we're on top of a pinnacle and there's a great deep chasm, all the other animals over there, and you cannot cross that chasm. And it was as though the chimpanzees, so like us, reached out to me and I reached back to them, and we crossed that chasm. And gradually science had to accept that after all, we are part of and not separate from the rest of the animal kingdom. It was my careful observations, others who came to help, but mainly my husband's very, very dramatic early documentary film, which made people understand that truly we are not so separate as scientists used to think. And today, because the chimpanzees helped us cross into the animal kingdom, as it were, we now have people studying animal personality, we have people studying animal emotions, we have a general consensus that animals are sentient, and we have a huge interest today in the scientific world in understanding animal intelligence, not just the chimpanzees and the whales and the elephants. We've long known how intelligent they are. And it's now we're beginning to understand the amazing intelligence of other animals. That's why I bring my friends here. That you haven't seen. This is Ratty. You can Google 5 smart rats and you will see something truly amazing. 5 rats, all named, with an amazing trainer who trains them by reward. What they do is utterly incredible. But Ratty is an example of a giant forest rat. They've been trained to detect landmines, and I've watched them being trained. They're so light, they never set off the landmine. You give a little scratch, and then people come along and detonate the landmine. And this is in Africa, where they're left in the fields after the Civil War. And then some of you must have seen my octopus teacher. Yes, yes. Well, this is Ollie the octopus, and octopuses are so incredibly intelligent. And I wish there was time to tell you stories about the octopus, because, well, I have to tell you one. This octopus was in an aquarium, and the people would come in sometimes in the morning and see a fish missing, but there was nothing wrong. So they put up a camera, and lo and behold, after everybody had gone, this octopus lifted the lid of her tank, crawled across the floor, went into another tank, consumed a fish, climbed out, closed the lid, went into her own tank, closed the lid, and there she was, all smug in the morning. Also bring cow, and cow comes for a certain reason, because cow is representing the fact that every single animal, factory farmed, cows, particularly pigs, goats, chickens, every single one of those animals who are so horribly, cruelly treated as a personality and is certainly capable of feeling fear and pain. We need to think about that. But I have to say at this point that moving towards a plant-based diet is one of the best things we can do for the climate change problem, because huge areas of land are cleared to grow the food to feed them, land which could be absorbing CO2 and storing it in the roots. And lots of fossil fuel is used to get the grain to the animals to the slaughter, the meat to the table. The animals are fed antibiotics regularly to keep them alive, and the bacteria are building up resistance, so we get these superbugs, and more antibiotics are useless. And then finally, all these animals in their digestion produce methane gas, which is a very, very virulent greenhouse gas. And in fact, this animal agriculture is one of the worst contributors to methane gas. And then of course, all the factory farming with its reliance on chemical pesticides and herbicides is not only harming biodiversity, but it's also killing the very soil on which we all survive. If we look around the world today, as I said earlier, it's a very depressing world. And I see the human species. It's as though we're at the mouth of a very long and very dark tunnel. And right at the end of that tunnel is a little star shining. That star is hope. But it's no good sitting at the mouth of the tunnel and hoping the star will come to us. No, we have to roll up our sleeves, and we have to crawl under, climb over, work our way around all the obstacles that lie between us and the star. And they're huge. Problems like climate change, loss of biodiversity, problems like poverty, because very poor people very often destroy the environment in order to survive. So the Little Gombe stream, where we still are studying chimpanzees in our 63rd year, still learning about them. And when I arrived in 1960, it was part of a great forest belt that stretched across Africa, equatorial Africa. And when I flew over in the late 1980s, I was shocked to see that the tiny Gombe National Park was just a small island of forest, and all around the hills that had been forested were bare. And I realized there were more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere. And they were cutting down the trees in order to make more land to grow food for their families, because their own farmland was overused and infertile, or they were cutting them down to make money from charcoal or timber. And that's when it hit me: if we can't help these people to find ways of living without destroying the environment. We can't save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else. And so it began the Jane Goodall Institute program to improve the lives of the people. It's called Takari. It's now in villages throughout Chimp Range in Tanzania. And people have understood that protecting the environment isn't just for wildlife, but it's for their own future. And one of the major things that we do is provide scholarships to give girls an opportunity for higher education. It's being found all around the world as women's education improves, family size drops. We have close to 8 billion people on the planet today. We're already running out of natural resources, in some places faster than nature can replenish them. It's estimated there'll be around 10 billion in 2050. What's going to happen? We can't put this under the carpet and not think about it. Anyway, we provide family planning and the people want it. They've understood a way out of poverty is to educate their children. They can't afford any longer to educate the 8 to 10 children per woman that was normal when I first arrived at Gombe. So that program is now in 6 other countries where JGI works with chimpanzees. It's making a huge difference. It's improving people's lives, raising them from poverty, protecting forests, and all the amazing biodiversity that lives in it. So, here we are in this tunnel. I've digressed from the tunnel because I wanted to talk about the importance of poverty. We also, one of the obstacles is ignorance. People sometimes make decisions because they simply haven't had the opportunity to learn what's really going on in the world. There are many people like that, people living in poverty in many countries. And you know about all the other problems we face, the pollution, air, water and land, and the loss of habitats, grasslands, the pollution of the ocean, the plastic pollution, all of these problems. The good news is there are groups of people working to solve every single problem that we can think of. The sad thing is that so many of them are working in their own little tunnel and they're not thinking of the big picture. So to give one simple example, hey, we've closed the coal mine, we've stopped all those terrible emissions, CO2 going up into the environment. Good for us. But if you're not looking at the whole picture, you're not realizing that you're going to put many people out of jobs and they may fall into poverty. If you're looking at the whole picture, you know that there are people working to train those who have lost their jobs as their industry collapses. And so you could reach out to those people and together work out what can be done for the coal miners who've lost their jobs. That's just one simple example. So, hope is about action. Hope is about taking action. And why do I have hope? Let me end up with that. So I've got 4 main reasons for hope. The first one is young people. And I think many of you know that JGI is a program called Roots and Shoots. It's within this university. There are many young people here. Roots and Shoots began in 1991 in Tanzania with 12 students. It's now in 68 countries and growing. And every group has its main message. Each individual makes an impact on the planet every single day. We have a choice as to what sort of impact we make. And because I learned in the rainforest how everything is interconnected, how every species has a role to play in this complex mix of plants and animals that make up an ecosystem. We decided in our Roots and Shoots program that each group would choose 3 projects. They choose it. It's not top down. It's young people being given an opportunity to really think and to really take action in a way that they feel is good. Of course, there's supervision for the younger ones, and we start with kindergarten, even preschool, but very, very strong in university, and even now some adult groups. And so we decided every group of Roots and Shoots would choose between them 3 projects: to help people, to help animals, to help the environment. And this is giving me such hope. The 2 days here in Hungary, I've been around groups of Roots and Shoots of different ages. The enthusiasm, the excitement, the dedication, the determination, they're changing the world. And this is happening in 68 countries. And it's very, very rewarding. And, you know, we have children. We can't lose hope when we have children. We have to have, particularly, we have to encourage children to have hope. How can we bring a child into the world and say, well, actually, we've given up, so there's no use you're bothering? No, no, no. We have to give them hope. And they are rising to that and doing amazing things. And my next reason for hope is this intellect. The biggest difference between us, chimpanzees, and other animals is the explosive development of our intellect. And isn't it peculiar? We've got this amazing intellect, but we seem to have lost intelligence, because intelligent creatures don't destroy the environment. I'm sure many of you have seen photographs of planet Earth taken from space, this beautiful green and blue globe surrounded by the dark black immensity of space. That's our home, and we're destroying it. We depend on the natural world, but we depend on healthy ecosystems. And as a species disappears from an ecosystem, remember, each one has a role to play. We gradually reduce those ecosystems until they collapse. We've got to stop doing that, because there's still time. We've still got a window of time. And fortunately, we're beginning to use our brains like renewable energy, using solar, wind, and tide power to create machines, which I've met some of them, that are sucking CO2 from the atmosphere and storing it in the ground, or using it for other purposes. And the young people are teaching their parents about recycling and reusing, and that's very dramatic. So we're beginning to use our brains every day, thinking about our own environmental footprint. How can we live to make this a more renewable, sustainable world? And then the next reason for hope is the resilience of nature. I talked about the bare hills around Gombe. There's no bare hills anymore. The trees come back. Give nature a chance, and she will reclothe areas that we have destroyed. There are places here in Budapest, or around Budapest, that were made into concrete car parks, and right in the middle of a forest, apparently. And that's changing as people break up the concrete, give nature a chance. Nature will come back. Planting trees, giving nature a helping hand. And yesterday, I was fortunate to watch the banding of 2 chicks of the white-tailed eagle. And the white-tailed eagle and the imperial eagle here in Hungary were disappearing. The numbers were very low, but because these groups, including WWF, have been working for years, now the numbers have shot up. It's sad they're still being shot, that many of them have bullets embedded in their flesh, but the numbers have gone up. And with luck, and with Roots and Shoots' help, we'll get the hunters to stop shooting these majestic birds of prey and allow them to take their place in the ecosystem. And then my final reason for hope is what I call the indomitable spirit, the people who tackle what seems absolutely impossible and won't give up. And sometimes they're icons like Nelson Mandela, who really ended apartheid in South Africa. And sometimes they're just people who want to tackle some of the problems that I've mentioned which seem impossible, particularly in some countries, but they don't give up, and they inspire others. And either they solve the problem, or the problem continues to be solved after they die because of the people they've inspired. But very often they actually succeed. And so this indomitable spirit you find in very strange places. A refugee comes into a country with nothing, very often facing hostility, and yet somehow they have that spirit that enables them to make a little livelihood, to get improved ways of living, to marry, to have some children, to have a house. And they smile at you if you go into their little shop. They don't have much, but they've made a living in spite of the obstacles that they faced. So I carry Mr. H with me, because the other thing that is very amazing in proving the indomitable spirit are the people with sometimes seemingly impossible physical disabilities who are out there in the world inspiring others. Mr. H was given to me about 30 years ago for my birthday. He was given to me by a man called Gary Horn, and Gary went blind when he was 21. He was in the US Marines. He thought he was giving me a stuffed chimpanzee for my birthday, and I took his hand and made him hold the tail. Gary, chimps don't have tails. He said, never mind, take him with you, and you know I'm with you in spirit. So when he went blind, for some odd reason, he decided he wanted to be a magician. Everybody said, Gary, you can't be a magician if you're blind. He's so good, he puts his props out ahead, children don't know he's blind. And at the end he'll tell them, and he'll say, something might happen in your life, but never give up. There's always a way forward. And he does skydiving, deep sea diving, in cages with sharks. But I think the most amazing thing, he's taught himself to paint. And in his little book called Blind Artist, there's a painting of Mr. H. He's never seen him, only felt him. And it's pretty amazing. And it's not only humans who have this indomitable spirit. And we have a little video which will show that some animals also have an indomitable spirit. In Africa, we have the Jane Goodall Institute has sanctuaries for chimpanzees who have been orphaned, their mothers shot for the bushmeat trade, or so that the babies can be sold overseas for entertainment or as pets. It's illegal, but the bushmeat trade is flourishing and the wild animal trafficking is terrible. And as it's illegal, it means that we can confiscate them with the government's permission. So the largest sanctuary for chimps in Africa is Chimpunga, run by JGI Spain. And this chimp that the video is about, her name is Wunda, which in the local language means close to death. She arrived in the sanctuary as an infant, badly wounded by the bullet that killed her mother. Our amazing veterinarian who runs the sanctuary, Rebecca Atencia, saved her life. And then when she was about 8, 9 years old, she got really sick again, and once more, Rebecca saved her life. Because Wunda had this longing to live. This video that we're going to show, some of you may have seen it, but it's worth looking at again. And when you see what happened, which was utterly incredible, as we put her out into this beautiful island, when you see what happened, please don't applaud. Try and imagine what it was like. It was silent. It was the sound of the birds and the rushing water. And this thing that happened to me was something I will never forget. So if we can run this video now to end what I need to say to you tonight. This is a really exciting moment for me, The Jane Goodall Institute's Chimpunga Chimpanzee Rehabilitation Center in the Republic of Congo has for years been caring for infants whose mothers were killed, mostly for the illegal bushmeat trade. Many of them are now fully grown. Recently, we acquired 3 large forested islands on the beautiful Kwilu River, where we can release many of the chimpanzees from our overcrowded center. In here in Bunda, and she nearly died, but thanks to Rebecca, she came back from the dead, and here she is about to come out into this paradise. She's the 15th chimpanzee to get her freedom here, and we hope ultimately to have about 60 on the island. Today is the first time I've met Bunda. I talked to her on the boat, trying to reassure her. She must have wondered what was happening. None of us could predict exactly what she would do once the cage door opened. It was a very, very touching moment. One of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me. The warmth of her embrace is something I shall never forget. For Wunda and all the other chimpanzees we're working to bring here, Chinzula Island will provide a wonderful forest home where they will be cared for and safe. To end this evening, I'm always saying nobody can do anything on their own. We need to work together. And so I would like to call up onto the stage everybody who's worked so hard in the Jane Goodall Institute Roots and Shoots staff to come up onto the platform. And we have 3 representatives here from the Salvia Foundation. The grant from the Salvia Foundation has enabled us to develop Roots and Shoots in Hungary. And we've also got some representatives from the Jane Goodall Institute in Austria, and possibly somebody from Belgium, although I'm not sure she's still here. So could those people come up onto the stage, because everything we do together, and it makes it bigger than if we try to do it alone.